The golden chandeliers cast a warm glow across the state dining room at Buckingham Palace as Princess Charlotte adjusted her navy blue dress for the third time in 10 minutes. The 9-year-old royal had attended many formal dinners before, but tonight felt different. The French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte were visiting for an important state banquet, and Charlotte could sense the extra tension in the air. "Stop fidgeting, Charlotte," her mother Catherine whispered gently as they waited in the green drawing room with other members of the royal family. The Princess of Wales looked stunning in an emerald green gown, but Charlotte noticed her mother's hands were clasped tightly together, a sure sign she was nervous too. Prince William stood nearby, adjusting his white tie and speaking quietly with King Charles. Charlotte's grandfather looked magnificent in his ceremonial uniform, covered with medals that caught the light every time he moved. She had always admired how confident he appeared at these events, never seeming worried or uncertain like she often felt. "Tonight is very special, Charlotte," King Charles had told her earlier that afternoon when he visited the Wales family at Adelaide Cottage. "The French president specifically requested that you attend the banquet. He's heard wonderful things about your French lessons and your interest in French culture." Charlotte had been studying French intensively for the past year with her private tutor, Madame Dubois. Unlike her brothers George and Louis, who found languages challenging, Charlotte had a natural gift for picking up new words and phrases. She could already hold simple conversations and had been reading French children's books with ease. The doors to the state dining room opened, and Charlotte followed her parents as they processed into the magnificent space. The table stretched almost the entire length of the room, set with the finest china and crystal. Golden candelabras lined the center, and fresh flowers from the palace gardens created beautiful arrangements between each setting. President Macron and his wife were already seated, chatting warmly with other guests. When Charlotte approached, the French president stood and smiled broadly. "Ah, Princess Charlotte, I've been looking forward to meeting you all evening." To everyone's surprise, Charlotte responded in perfect French. "Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président. C'est un honneur de vous rencontrer." The president's eyebrows raised in delight, and he immediately began speaking to her in rapid French about her studies and interests. Charlotte found herself enjoying the conversation immensely. President Macron asked about her favorite subjects at school, her hobbies, and what she hoped to do when she grew up. She told him in French about her love of tennis, her art classes, and how she wanted to learn more about different countries and cultures. "Your French is absolutely remarkable for someone your age," President Macron said, switching back to English so others could understand. "Have you ever visited France?" "Not yet," Charlotte replied, "but I would love to see Paris and learn about French history. Madame Dubois tells me wonderful stories about the Palace of Versailles and the Louvre Museum." King Charles had been listening to this exchange with growing pride. He watched as his granddaughter handled herself with poise and maturity far beyond her years. The other dinner guests were clearly impressed by Charlotte's intelligence and charm. As the first course was served, delicate soup made with French truffles, Charlotte continued her conversation with the French delegation. She asked thoughtful questions about life in France and shared her own experiences of growing up in England. Her natural curiosity and genuine interest in learning about other cultures shone through every word. "She reminds me very much of her great-grandmother," King Charles murmured to Prince William. Queen Elizabeth had that same gift for making people feel valued and heard. The evening progressed beautifully, with Charlotte participating confidently in discussions about art, literature, and music. When the conversation turned to classical composers, she surprised everyone by mentioning that she had been learning to play Debussy on the piano, a French composer she had discovered. Through her language studies, Madame Macron was particularly charmed by Charlotte's enthusiasm. "You must promise to visit us in Paris soon," she said warmly. "I think you would absolutely love the Musée d'Orsay. They have the most beautiful collection of French Impressionist paintings." "I would love that more than anything," Charlotte responded, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "I've been studying Monet and Renoir in my art classes." As the main course was served traditional British beef Wellington alongside French-inspired side dishes. King Charles began to think about something he had been considering for several weeks: Charlotte's natural diplomatic abilities, combined with her genuine love of French culture and language, had given him an idea that could benefit both their family and the relationship between Britain and France. The king had been observing Charlotte throughout the evening, noting how she listened carefully to every person who spoke to her, how she asked follow-up questions that showed real interest, and how she made everyone around her feel comfortable and valued. These were exactly the qualities needed for successful diplomatic work. During a brief pause between courses, King Charles caught the attention of President Macron. "Monsieur le President, I wonder if I might have a word with you about a rather special idea I've been developing." The two men spoke quietly for several minutes while Charlotte chatted with other guests. President Macron's expression grew increasingly interested as the king outlined his proposal. Finally, the French president nodded enthusiastically and smiled broadly. "I think that would be absolutely wonderful," President Macron said. "Charlotte would be perfect for such a role." Charlotte noticed the two men looking in her direction with mysterious smiles, but she was too polite to ask what they had been discussing. Instead, she continued, enjoying her dinner and the lively conversation around the table. Little did she know that her grandfather was planning something that would change her life forever, something that would recognize her unique talents and give her an official role in strengthening the bonds between two great nations. The announcement would come before the evening ended, and it would leave everyone at the banquet completely stunned. As the dessert course began, an elaborate chocolate soufflé with fresh berries, Charlotte noticed that several staff members had entered the dining room carrying official-looking documents. Her grandfather, King Charles, had excused himself briefly from the table, speaking quietly with his private secretary near the doorway. The atmosphere in the room had shifted subtly. While the conversation continued around the table, there was an undercurrent of anticipation that Charlotte couldn't quite understand. President Macron kept glancing at King Charles with an expression of barely contained excitement, and even her parents seemed to sense that something important was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," King Charles announced as he returned to his place at the head of the table, "before we conclude this wonderful evening, I have something rather special to share with you all." The room fell silent except for the soft clinking of crystal glasses being carefully set down. Charlotte felt her heart rate quicken, though she had no idea why. She looked at her mother, who was watching King Charles with wide, curious eyes. "Tonight has been a perfect example of the strong friendship between our two nations," the king continued, his voice carrying the authority and warmth that had made him such an effective monarch. "We have enjoyed wonderful conversation, shared our cultures, and celebrated the ties that bind Britain and France together." President Macron nodded in agreement, his eyes twinkling with what looked like a secret he was eager to share. "During our discussions this evening," King Charles went on, "I have been particularly impressed by one member of our family, who has shown extraordinary promise in building bridges between our countries. Someone who has demonstrated not only exceptional linguistic abilities but also a natural gift for diplomacy and cultural understanding." Charlotte's stomach began to flutter with nervousness. Surely her grandfather wasn't talking about her. She was just 9 years old, after all. But as she looked around the table, she noticed that several guests were smiling in her direction. "Princess Charlotte," King Charles said, turning to face his granddaughter directly, "would you please stand?" Charlotte's face flushed pink as she slowly rose from her chair, her legs feeling slightly unsteady. Every eye in the room was focused on her, and she could hear the soft whir of camera shutters from the official photographers who had been discreetly capturing moments throughout the evening. "Your Royal Highness," President Macron said, also standing and speaking directly to Charlotte, "it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you this evening. Your knowledge of French culture, your linguistic skills, and your genuine interest in building friendships between our nations have impressed me greatly." Charlotte managed a small smile and a polite merci beaucoup. "Monsieur le Président," though she still had no idea where this was leading, King Charles picked up an ornate document that had been placed beside his chair. The paper appeared to be made of heavy cream-colored parchment, with elaborate calligraphy and the royal seal prominently displayed at the top. "Princess Charlotte," her grandfather said formally, "by the power vested in me as King of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms, and with the enthusiastic support of our distinguished French guests, I hereby bestow upon you the title of Honorary Ambassador of Cultural Exchange between the United Kingdom and the Republic of France." A collective gasp went up around the table. Charlotte's mouth fell open in complete shock. Prince William reached over and squeezed Catherine's hand, both parents beaming with pride and amazement. "This is an entirely new title," King Charles explained to the stunned guests, "created specifically to recognize Princess Charlotte's unique abilities and to formalize her role in strengthening the cultural bonds between our two nations." President Macron stepped forward, carrying a beautiful blue velvet box. "Princess Charlotte, on behalf of the French Republic, I am honored to present you with this medal, the Order of Cultural Friendship, which has been specially created for this historic occasion." Charlotte's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the box and opened it carefully. Inside was a stunning medal made of gold and enamel, featuring the flags of both Britain and France intertwined with symbols of art, music, and literature. The ribbon was striped in the colors of both nations. I don't know what to say," Charlotte whispered, her voice barely audible above the excited murmurs of the other guests. "Thank you so much. This is incredible. The position comes with some wonderful responsibilities," King Charles continued, clearly enjoying his granddaughter's amazement. "You will serve as a special liaison between young people in both countries, helping to organize cultural exchanges, language programs, and educational partnerships." President Macron nodded enthusiastically. "We hope you will visit France officially within the next few months to meet with French students and cultural organizations. You would be our youngest but most important ambassador." Charlotte's mind was racing. Just this morning she had been a regular princess attending school and doing her homework like any other child. Now she was being given an official diplomatic role that would connect her to an entire country and its people. "Will I really get to help other children learn about France?" she asked, her voice growing stronger with excitement. "Absolutely," her grandfather replied. "You'll work with schools in both countries to create pen pal programs, organize student visits, and help young people learn about each other's cultures and languages." The other guests began to applaud, and Charlotte felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had ever experienced. This wasn't just about her love of French language and culture, it was about using those interests to make a real difference in the world. Catherine wiped away a tear of joy as she watched her daughter accept congratulations from the distinguished guests. Prince William stood and walked over to embrace Charlotte, whispering in her ear, "We are so incredibly proud of you, sweetheart." The evening was far from over, and Charlotte knew that the real work of her new role was just beginning. But as she looked around the table at the smiling faces of people from two great nations, she felt ready for whatever challenges and adventures lay ahead. The news of Princess Charlotte's unprecedented appointment spread like wildfire across social media even before the state banquet had concluded. Palace staff had carefully coordinated the announcement with both British and French media outlets, ensuring that the historic moment would be properly documented and shared with the world. By the time Charlotte returned to Adelaide Cottage that evening, still wearing her beautiful new medal, trending hashtags like #Princess Charlotte Ambassador and #Young Diplomat were already dominating Twitter and Instagram. News channels on both sides of the English Channel were running special reports about the 9-year-old princess who had captured the hearts of two nations in a single evening. "Mummy, look at this." Prince George called from the sitting room where he had been watching the late news with his nanny. "Charlotte's on television." The entire family gathered around the screen as BBC News ran footage from the banquet. Charlotte watched herself in amazement, hardly believing that the poised young girl speaking fluent French on screen was really her. The news anchor was explaining the significance of the new title and the potential impact it could have on British-French relations. The creation of this ambassadorial role for Princess Charlotte represents a completely new approach to cultural diplomacy, the reporter was saying. By appointing someone so young to this position, King Charles is acknowledging the vital importance of connecting with the next generation and fostering understanding from an early age. Prince Louis, who was only 5 years old, looked confused by all the excitement. "Why is Charlotte on the telly?" he asked innocently. "Did she do something naughty?" Catherine laughed and pulled her youngest son onto her lap. "No, darling. Charlotte did something very special tonight. She showed everyone how smart and kind she is, and now she has an important job helping children in England and France become friends. Like pen pals?" Louis asked, remembering a story his teacher had read about children writing letters to each other in different countries. "Exactly like pen pals," Charlotte said, sitting down beside her little brother. "But even better. I'll get to help organize visits and trips and all sorts of exciting things." Prince William muted the television as his phone began ringing with calls from various palace officials and government ministers who wanted to discuss the implications of Charlotte's new role. The appointment had been kept so secret that even senior members of the royal household had been caught off guard by the evening's announcement. "The Prime Minister's office has already called 3 times," William told Catherine quietly. "They want to schedule meetings to discuss how Charlotte's role will integrate with existing diplomatic protocols." Catherine shook her head in amazement. "She's 9 years old, William. Just this morning she was worried about her math homework. And now government ministers want to meet with her about diplomatic protocols." Meanwhile, Charlotte was discovering that her new position came with immediate responsibilities. King Charles had asked her to join him for breakfast the following morning at Buckingham Palace, where they would discuss the details of her role and begin planning her first official visit to France. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Charlotte felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she walked through the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace toward the king's private dining room. She had been to the palace countless times before, but today everything felt different. Today she was here in an official capacity. "Good morning, Your Royal Highness," said Sir Clive Alderton, the king's private secretary, as he greeted Charlotte at the door. "His Majesty is waiting for you." King Charles was already seated at the small, intimate table when Charlotte entered. He was reading through a stack of papers while sipping his tea, but he immediately set everything aside when he saw his granddaughter. "Charlotte, how are you feeling this morning? Any regrets about accepting your new role?" he asked with a warm smile. "No regrets at all, Grandpapa," Charlotte replied confidently. "I'm excited to get started. When do I get to visit France?" "Very soon indeed," King Charles said, gesturing for her to take a seat. "President Macron has extended an official invitation for you to visit Paris in 3 weeks' time. You would spend 4 days there, meeting with French students, visiting cultural sites, and participating in several ceremonial events." Charlotte's eyes widened with excitement. "For whole days in Paris? Will I get to see the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre?" "Of course, but you'll also have some very important work to do," the king explained. "You'll be meeting with students from several French schools who are learning English. They're incredibly excited to practice their conversation skills with you." A palace aide entered the dining room carrying a large folder filled with documents and photographs. "Your Majesty, these are the preliminary plans for Princess Charlotte's visit to Paris, along with information about the schools and organizations she'll be working with." Charlotte opened the folder eagerly, her eyes scanning through pictures of smiling French children, beautiful Parisian landmarks, and detailed itineraries for her upcoming trip. One photograph showed a group of students at a school in Montmartre holding signs that read "Bienvenue Princess Charlotte" in colorful letters. "They made those signs specifically for your visit," King Charles explained. "The children at École Élémentaire Saint-Pierre have been studying British culture and practicing their English for weeks in preparation for meeting you. This is so much better than I ever imagined," Charlotte said, carefully studying each document. "Look at this They want to show me their art projects about London, and we're going to have a joint choir performance where they sing English songs and I sing French ones." The king watched his granddaughter's enthusiasm with deep satisfaction. He had taken a significant risk in creating this new role for someone so young. But Charlotte's genuine passion for cultural exchange and her natural maturity convinced him it was the right decision. "There is one more surprise," King Charles said mysteriously, pulling out a final document from beneath the others. "President Macron has arranged for you to have a private meeting with the mayor of Paris, and they want to present you with the keys to the city." Charlotte's jaw dropped. "The keys to Paris? But I'm just 9 years old." "You may be 9 years old, but you're also the first honorary ambassador of cultural exchange between our countries," her grandfather reminded her. "That makes you very special indeed." 3 weeks later, Charlotte stood at the window of the royal aircraft as it descended toward Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. She had barely slept the night before, too excited about her first official diplomatic mission to rest properly. The view below showed the sprawling city that she had dreamed of visiting for so long, and now she was arriving not just as a tourist, but as an official representative of her country. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart?" Catherine asked, straightening Charlotte's navy blue coat and ensuring her new medal was properly positioned. Prince William had accompanied them on the trip, along with a small team of palace officials and security personnel. "I think so," Charlotte replied, though her stomach was full of butterflies. "What if I forget my French when I get nervous?" "You won't," her mother assured her. "You've been practicing for weeks, and Madame Dubois says your pronunciation is perfect. Just remember to speak slowly and clearly, and don't worry if you need to ask someone to repeat something." The aircraft touched down smoothly, and Charlotte could see a delegation of French officials waiting on the tarmac. Red carpets had been rolled out, and both British and French flags fluttered in the breeze. It was a level of ceremony typically reserved for heads of state, not 9-year-old princesses. President Macron was the first to greet Charlotte as she descended from the plane. "Bienvenue en France, Princess Charlotte," he said warmly, bowing slightly as she approached. "Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président," Charlotte replied confidently. "Je suis très heureuse d'être ici." Her French was clear and well pronounced, drawing approving nods from the assembled dignitaries. The French education minister, Madame Papnaye, stepped forward with a beautiful bouquet of white and blue flowers. "Princess Charlotte, these are from the students you will be meeting today. They picked the colors to represent both our nations." Charlotte accepted the flowers gracefully and thanked the education minister in French. The brief exchange was captured by dozens of photographers and camera crews, and the images would soon be broadcast around the world. The motorcade that transported Charlotte and her family into central Paris was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Crowds of people lined the streets, waving both British and French flags and cheering as the convoy passed. Many held signs written in English welcoming the young princes to their city. "Look at all these people," Charlotte gasped, pressing her face to the window. "They came just to see us?" "They came to see you," Prince William corrected gently. "You've become quite famous here in France, Charlotte. The French media has been covering your appointment extensively, and people are genuinely excited about what your role represents." Their first stop was École Élémentaire Saint-Pierre in Montmartre, where Charlotte would meet with students who had been learning English. The school had been decorated with colorful banners and artwork celebrating British culture. Union Jack flags hung alongside the tricolor, and student artwork depicting famous British landmarks covered the hallway walls. When Charlotte entered the main classroom, 30 excited French children aged 8 to 10 burst into applause. They had been practicing for weeks, learning English songs and preparing presentations about their favorite aspects of British culture. "Bonjour, Princess Charlotte," the children chorused in heavily accented English. "Welcome to our school." "Bonjour, everyone," Charlotte replied in French, which delighted the children even more. "Your English sounds wonderful. I'm so excited to meet all of you." The teacher, Madame Laurent, had organized several activities for Charlotte's visit. First, the children performed a song they had learned called London Bridge is Falling Down, singing it with adorable French accents that made Charlotte smile with delight. That was beautiful. Charlotte told them in English, speaking slowly and clearly. Now, would you like to hear a French song? I've been practicing Alouette just for you. Charlotte's performance of the traditional French song brought huge smiles to the children's faces. Several of them began singing along, helping her with the pronunciation and laughing when she made small mistakes. The visit continued with a show-and-tell session where French students presented their projects about British culture. One boy named Pierre had created a detailed model of Big Ben, while a girl named Marie had written a short story about visiting Buckingham Palace. Charlotte listened carefully to each presentation, asking thoughtful questions and praising their efforts in both English and French. "Princess Charlotte," asked a shy girl named Sophie, "do you really live in a castle?" Charlotte laughed. "Not exactly a castle, but yes, I do live in some very old and beautiful buildings. But you know what? I go to school just like you do, and I have homework and chores just like you do too." The children were fascinated by this glimpse into royal life, and they peppered Charlotte with questions about her daily routine, her favorite subjects in school, and whether she had ever met the Queen. Charlotte answered each question patiently, always making sure to ask the children about their own lives and interests in return. The highlight of the school visit was a collaborative art project where Charlotte and the French students worked together to create a large mural celebrating friendship between Britain and France. Charlotte painted a red double-decker bus while her new French friends added the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, and various symbols representing both cultures. "This is so much fun," Charlotte told Madame Laurent as she helped a young boy named Antoine add some details to his painting of the London Eye. "These children are so talented and friendly. I feel like I've made 30 new friends already." "They feel the same way about you," the teacher replied. "They've been talking about this visit for weeks. You've given them such inspiration to continue studying English and learning about other cultures." As the school visit concluded, the children presented Charlotte with a special gift, a handmade book filled with letters and drawings from students throughout the school. Each page contained messages of friendship written in both French and English, along with colorful illustrations of their favorite things about Britain and France. "We will always remember this day," little Sophie said, giving Charlotte a tight hug. "Will you come visit us again?" "I hope so very much," Charlotte replied, genuinely touched by the warmth and enthusiasm she had received. "And maybe some of you can visit England someday too. That's what my new job is all about, helping children from our countries become friends." As they left the school, Charlotte waved goodbye to the children who had gathered at the windows to see her off. She clutched their special book tightly in her arms, already planning to show it to her brothers when she returned home. This was only the first day of her visit to France, and already it was exceeding all her expectations. The second day of Charlotte's official visit to France began with a ceremonial event that would be remembered for generations. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, had organized a special presentation at the magnificent Hôtel de Ville, the historic city hall that had witnessed centuries of important diplomatic moments. Charlotte felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she walked up the grand stone steps of the building, flanked by her parents and a small entourage of French officials. The morning sunshine illuminated the ornate facade, and Charlotte couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the architecture surrounding her. "Remember, sweetheart," Prince William whispered as they approached the main entrance, "this is a very important honor. Very few people receive the keys to Paris, and you're certainly the youngest person ever to be given this recognition." Inside the building, Charlotte was amazed by the opulent interior. Crystal chandeliers hung from elaborately decorated ceilings, and the walls were covered with stunning paintings depicting important moments in French history. The ceremony would take place in the Salon des Arcades, a room that had hosted kings, presidents, and world leaders throughout the centuries. Mayor Hidalgo greeted Charlotte warmly in the reception area. "Princess Charlotte, welcome to our beautiful city hall. Are you ready to become an honorary citizen of Paris? Oui, Madame la Mère, Charlotte replied in careful French. C'est un grand honneur pour moi. Her response brought smiles from the assembled French officials, who were clearly delighted by her effort to speak their language. The ceremony itself was both formal and heartwarming. Charlotte stood before a lectern in the Grand Salon while Mayor Hidalgo delivered a speech about the importance of cultural exchange and the special role that young people play in building bridges between nations. Princess Charlotte, the mayor said, switching between French and English to ensure everyone could understand. Your enthusiasm for our culture and your dedication to fostering friendship between our countries has impressed all of France. Today, we welcome you not just as a visitor, but as a true friend of our city. The actual presentation of the keys was a moment of pure magic. The ornate golden keys were presented on a velvet cushion, along with an official certificate declaring Charlotte an honorary citizen of Paris. As she accepted the symbolic keys, photographers captured the historic moment from every angle. These keys represent our trust in you, Mayor Hidalgo explained as Charlotte carefully held the precious items. They symbolize our hope that you will continue to open doors of understanding between our peoples for many years to come. Charlotte's response, delivered in both French and English, brought tears to the eyes of several audience members. I promise to use these keys to open hearts and minds, she said solemnly. I will work to help children in both our countries learn from each other and become lifelong friends. After the ceremony, Charlotte was given a private tour of some of the most beautiful rooms in the Hôtel de Ville. She was particularly fascinated by the Salon des Fêtes, with its incredible frescoed ceiling and massive crystal chandeliers. The tour guide, Monsieur Beaumont, explained the history of each room and shared stories about famous visitors who had walked these same halls. Napoleon Bonaparte himself once stood in this very spot, Monsieur Beaumont told Charlotte as they paused in front of an enormous mirror in the Galerie des Fêtes. And now you're here too, making your own piece of history. The afternoon brought another special experience, a visit to the Musée d'Orsay, where Charlotte would see some of the world's most famous Impressionist paintings. She had been studying these artists in her art classes, but seeing the actual paintings in person was completely different from looking at pictures in books. Standing before Monet's Water Lily, Charlotte was speechless with wonder. The curator, Madame Rousseau, noticed her fascination and began explaining the techniques. Monet used to capture the changing light and reflections on the water. You see how he didn't try to paint exactly what he saw, Madame Rousseau explained in English. Instead, he painted the feeling of what he saw, the impression it made on him. That's why we call this style Impressionism. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully, studying the brushstrokes up close. It's like he was painting a moment in time that would never happen again exactly the same way. Exactly, the curator exclaimed, delighted by Charlotte's understanding. You have the soul of an artist, Princess Charlotte. The museum visit included a special workshop where Charlotte learned some basic Impressionist painting techniques. Working alongside a group of young French art students, she created her own small painting inspired by Renoir's style. The other students were initially shy around the royal visitor, but Charlotte's friendly demeanor and genuine interest in their work quickly put everyone at ease. Your painting is very good, said a teenage art student named Camille. You understand how to mix colors to show light. Thank you, Charlotte replied, working carefully on her canvas. I've been practicing at home, but it's different doing it here where these amazing artists actually worked. The day concluded with an intimate dinner at the British ambassador's residence, where Charlotte met with representatives from various French cultural organizations. The conversation centered around practical plans for implementing her role as cultural ambassador, including student exchange programs, language learning initiatives, and collaborative art projects. We have so many ideas for connecting young people from our countries, explained Madame Petty from the Franco-British Cultural Association. With your support, Princess Charlotte, we could create pen pal programs between schools, organize virtual cultural exchanges, and even develop language learning apps designed specifically for children. Charlotte listened carefully to each proposal, asking thoughtful questions and offering her own ideas. Her natural enthusiasm and genuine desire to make a difference impressed all the adults at the table. "I want to make sure we include children from all backgrounds," Charlotte said during the discussion. "Not just children from fancy schools, but kids from everywhere who want to learn about other cultures." The French officials exchanged appreciative glances. Here was a 9-year-old princess who understood that true cultural diplomacy needed to reach all levels of society, not just the privileged elite. As the evening ended, Charlotte reflected on everything she had experienced in just 2 days. She had received one of the highest honors Paris could bestow, seen some of the world's greatest art treasures, and met dozens of wonderful French people who shared her passion for building connections across cultures. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, including a visit to the Palace of Versailles and meetings with more students. But tonight, as she fell asleep in her room at the British ambassador's residence, Charlotte felt proud of the work she was already doing and excited about all the possibilities that lay ahead. Charlotte's final day in Paris dawned with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the ambassador's residence. Today would include visits to the iconic Palace of Versailles and a farewell celebration with French students. But first, she had an important video call scheduled with King Charles to update him on her mission. "Good morning, Grandpapa," Charlotte said brightly as her grandfather appeared on the laptop screen. Behind him, she could see the familiar surroundings of his study at Buckingham Palace. "Charlotte, my dear, you look absolutely radiant," King Charles replied warmly. "I've been following your visit through the news reports, and I couldn't be more proud. Tell me about your experiences." Charlotte spent nearly 20 minutes describing everything she had seen and done. From her meetings with French students to receiving the keys to Paris, her enthusiasm was infectious, and King Charles found himself smiling broadly as she recounted each adventure. "The children at the school were so wonderful, Grandpapa. They taught me a new French song, and we painted a friendship mural together. And yesterday at the museum, I learned how to paint like the Impressionists." "I can see this role was absolutely the right choice for you," the king said approvingly. "But tell me, have you given any thought to what you'd like to do when you return home? How can we build on this success?" Charlotte's expression grew serious as she considered the question. "I want to start a pen pal program right away, and I think we should invite some of these French children to visit England. They're so excited about British culture, and it would be amazing if they could see our castles and museums too." "Excellent thinking," King Charles agreed. "I'll have my staff begin working on arrangements immediately." "What else?" "I'd like to create a special website where British and French children can share their artwork and stories with each other." Charlotte continued, her ideas flowing freely. "And maybe we could organize video calls between classrooms so kids can practice speaking each other's languages." After the call ended, Charlotte joined her parents for the journey to Versailles. As their car wound through the French countryside, she pressed her nose to the window, watching the landscape change from urban Paris to the more pastoral surroundings of the famous palace. "Are you nervous about today?" Catherine asked, noticing Charlotte's quiet mood. "A little," Charlotte admitted. "Versailles is so important historically. I want to make sure I ask good questions and learn as much as possible." When they arrived at the Palace of Versailles, Charlotte was overwhelmed by the sheer scale and magnificence of the building. The golden gates, the vast courtyards, and the ornate facade were even more impressive than she had imagined from pictures in her history books. The special curator, assigned to guide Charlotte's tour, Monsieur Lemoyne, was an expert on the palace's history and its role in French culture. As they walked through the famous Hall of Mirrors, he explained how the room had been used for important treaties and celebrations throughout history. "This is where the Treaty of Versailles was signed after World War I," Monsieur Lemoyne explained as they paused in the center of the glittering hall. "It was one of the most important diplomatic events in modern history." Charlotte studied the elaborate mirrors and crystal chandeliers, trying to imagine the historical figures who had walked these same floors. "It must have been incredible to witness such important moments," she said thoughtfully. The tour continued through the royal apartments. where Charlotte learned about the daily life of French royalty centuries ago. She was particularly fascinated by the Queen's apartments, asking detailed questions about how royal children of the past had spent their days. "Did the princes and princesses have tutors like I do?" she asked. "Did they study languages and history?" "Oh yes," the curator replied. Royal education was considered very important. Young royals learned multiple languages, studied art and music, and were trained in diplomacy from an early age, much like what you're doing now. The highlight of the Versailles visit was a special reception in the Grand Trianon, where Charlotte met with a group of French teenagers who were participating in an international exchange program. These students, aged 14 to 17, were spending a year studying in various countries around the world. "Princess Charlotte," said a confident French student named Elise, "we've been following your visit in the news. What advice would you give to young people who want to build bridges between cultures?" Charlotte thought carefully before responding. "I think the most important thing is to be genuinely curious about other people and their ways of life. Don't just learn facts about other countries, try to understand how people feel and what matters to them." Another student, Thomas, asked about the challenges of her new role. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by all the responsibility?" "Sometimes," Charlotte answered honestly. "But then I remember that this isn't really about me, it's about helping people connect with each other. When I focus on that goal instead of worrying about myself, everything becomes easier." The conversation with the teenagers lasted for over an hour, covering topics from language learning to travel experiences to career aspirations. Charlotte found herself energized by their enthusiasm and inspired by their stories of living in different countries. As the day drew to a close, Charlotte attended a farewell celebration at the École Normale Supérieure, one of France's most prestigious universities. Students from schools across Paris had gathered to say goodbye to their young ambassador and share their hopes for future cultural exchanges. The evening began with performances by both British and French students. A choir from London performed French songs via video link, while French students sang British folk songs they had learned specifically for the occasion. Charlotte joined in several of the performances, her clear voice blending beautifully with the chorus. "Princess Charlotte," said the university rector during the closing ceremony, "in just 4 days you have shown us the true meaning of cultural diplomacy. You have listened with genuine interest, shared your own culture with grace, and inspired all of us to think more deeply about what connects us as human beings." Charlotte's farewell speech, delivered in both English and French, brought the audience to their feet in applause. "This week has been the most amazing experience of my life," she said, her voice strong despite her emotion. "You have all taught me so much, and I promise that this is just the beginning of our friendship. I will work every day to make sure that children from our countries continue to learn from each other and build lasting bonds." As the plane lifted off from Charles de Gaulle Airport the next morning, Charlotte watched Paris disappear below the clouds. In her carry-on bag, she had carefully packed the keys to the city, dozens of letters from French children, her impressionist painting from the museum workshop, and a heart full of memories that would last a lifetime. The 9-year-old, who had nervously attended a state banquet just weeks earlier, was returning home as a confident young diplomat, ready to begin the real work of her historic new role. The world was watching, and Princess Charlotte was ready to show them what the next generation of royal service could accomplish.